Hi everyone, I'm Catherine from Peace Etc. and I guide people who grew up in mentally and emotionally unstable homes to become safe and secure within themselves. So today I wanted to talk about the role that I played of being a good child. Um, Needless to say, I wasn't a good child always outside of the home. I had my fun. But at home, in order to keep the peace, because there's so much chaos already happening, I took on the role of being a good child. And for me, this entailed like people pleasing and really hiding myself and making sure that I wasn't causing any trouble. Um, though at times I did. But as much as possible, I just like really stuffed myself down and pleased my parents so that there wouldn't be more chaos than there already was. More emotional and mental struggles or turbulence at home than there was. And so for a long time, I suppressed how I really felt about their actions, about what I felt, my reactions, my response, because I really tailored everything so that they would feel secure and safe. But this all like came to the surface and erupted later on in life. All the resentment that had built up because I wasn't expressing myself, because I was stuffing things down. This all erupted between the ages of 25 to 28. So I had a rebellious phase much later on in my life than when kids typically have a rebellious phase. And I think, I wanted to share this because I feel like I'm not the only one. Like I took so much pride in being a good child that didn't cause so much distress for my parents. Not that I knew of, and I was like trying to control how they felt basically in order to keep the peace. Yeah, and I feel like people can easily take pride in not causing other people so much like distress or not being so much or not being drama or whatever. And in doing so, you really stifle yourself and you're not being yourself and you're not being natural. So, yeah, now that I like in hindsight, I've been reflecting on this and being like, there's no pride in being a quote unquote good child. Like, I didn't need to derive my sense of self worth and pride and feel good about myself through being a good child, because later on, when I actually started reconnecting with myself, I felt pretty shitty, that I had thought so little of myself and that I could take up so little space in order to feel good about myself. And now I feel good about myself regardless of however much space I'm taking, and whether I'm seen as good in the eyes of others or seen as bad in the eyes of others. So, yeah. And in hindsight, when I reflect on this phase of my life or that phase of my life, I believe that there are important skills that you can learn during a rebellious phase, and I wanted to share some that I've noted down. So number one is like questioning authority. You don't always have to believe what your parents say, and just because they're your parents, that doesn't mean that they're right, or that they know everything. Everyone has their own perspective and their own lens, and some things that your parents teaches may be coming from the heart, others may be coming from their own wounds and ego or wounded ego. So for me, I swallowed everything my mom said as truths, because I didn't know how to really speak up for myself and to question. And it was easier to automatically assume that whatever she said was right. And that was the environment and that was the climate in my home. So I did what my dad was doing. I did what I knew in order to keep the peace. But now I really think that it's important to be able to question, what your parents teaches you or what others teach you, or who you might think are quote unquote above you. So yeah, questioning authority I think is very important that you learn during a rebellious phase. And if you didn't have a rebellious phase when you're a child, then you can begin to really start questioning authority at any time. And also another important skill is the skill of asking questions and getting the courage to ask questions to people who you may not have spoken up to before, and that you're allowed to do so. It's just fear that keeps you from asking questions. And maybe there are people in your life that you fear your safety, like physically as well, and not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. Like if there are people in your life that you feel afraid to ask questions towards, then you don't have to force yourself if it actually causes you harm. But I'm not asking you to do that. But asking questions is really important to anybody. And from asking questions, and if there are people in your life where you ask questions and they're not welcome and they get met with resistance all the time and there's no free speech, then, that's also a seed for you to think about. Like, do I want to keep this connection? Is this serving me? Is this good for me? Because you have a choice, right? And for me, I learned that open dialogue and being able to ask questions is really important. So people in my life people who used to be in my life who weren't okay with questions no longer are really in my life, or I put them in the back seat, because that's really important for me, being able to ask questions, have open discussions, and I love questions. So yeah. And also, rebellious phase is a time where you really get to see what your values are. So, allowing yourself to feel and have conversations and respond to what you're feeling instead of molding your feelings in order to please other people really lets you see what works for you, what doesn't, what you like, what you don't like. And for me, I learned what I like and dislike much later on in my life because I didn't let myself respond and really accept my feelings. And so rebellious phase is a really important time where you can learn your values and what or who you align with, kind of similar to your values. And also really, really important is you learn to accept others as they are. So when you're more focused on presenting a self that you think is acceptable and that's lovable, you're not really seeing other people for who they are. You think external validation is the most important thing, and this can be coming from anybody. So then you're focused on getting their love, getting their acceptance. It doesn't matter who they are, because you don't have this sense of self-acceptance and self-love within you. You think you need all these resources to fill your cup. But once you really start building self-love and really start accepting yourself for who you are internally, you're doing the accepting and loving, then you start detaching from other people, like in needing them to accept and love you. So then you're not molding other people into who you need them to be. You can see others for who they are, what their capacities are, what their capacities aren't, and what they're like, what they're not like. So instead of really living in your head as to who people are, you get to see them for who they really are. And you're also seeing yourself for who they are and who you are. So when you can see others for who they are, you can choose. Do I want to connect with them? Do I not want to connect with them? And if you have some kind of discrepancy between who you thought they were and who they're presenting themselves to be, then you can bridge the gap as well. And that's also a time when you can pause and reflect, like, again, do you want to connect with them or do you not want to connect with them? Right? And so you're not living in your imagination and you're more in the present and really seeing people for who they are. And also, it's more peaceful that way. When you're able to accept others for who they are, you're not wishing that things would be different like all the time and like pushing them to be different and someone they're not. And of course, that creates its own conflicts and chaos and instability. You know, when you can really let loose, let go of who you need other people to be, then you feel stable inside. You feel more secure inside because you're accepting them. And you don't need to go there and push, push, push to get what you need. But of course, first and foremost, you fulfill yourself, but then you can connect with other people that have the characteristics or are more aligned with what you're looking for or who the kind of people that you want to connect. And you can just let others be. What's it called? Like, let go and let be? I don't know, like there's a famous saying like that, right? And so because you're not always pushing and striving and controlling and manipulating yourself or others, everything's much more peaceful. Or your relationship with other people is much more peaceful and it creates that much room in your life. So that's very, very important that I learned in hindsight from my late rebellious phase. Yeah, and having discussions and learning to speak up. Learning to speak up, no matter who it is, has been a very important skill that I've learned. And luckily for me, it's not always easy, of course. But usually when I speak up for myself, people have taken it better than I expected. They've shown me that they care. Of course, sometimes people do react and it's not easy. Like it can make me feel scared too in that moment. But at the same time, it feels better because I feel better because I'm speaking up now rather than keeping things within and like stifling them. So I'd rather face my fear of speaking up and just do that and deal with the consequences than feel so shitty within and like even shittier because keeping myself repressed is like it comes from a place of not feeling good enough to open up, not feeling like I'm deserving of speaking up how I truly feel or speaking up about my experiences. So repressing, I found, is worse for my self-esteem and self-worth than actually facing that initial fear and in that moment fear of speaking up. In the long term, speaking up, no matter how much it can inconvenience somebody, for me, is better for my self-worth and self-esteem. And also I want to differentiate, like, it's me speaking from my heart. There's a difference between like speaking and saying stuff just so you feel good. It's not coming from the heart versus really speaking your truth and speaking from your heart. And for that, I'll go into that another time because I've definitely had my share of experiences around that and speaking up as I learn to do so. But for now, yeah, I think this is good. So have you lived with that label of being a good child? And are you sick of it? Because I got sick of it. Please feel free to comment in the comment section about your experiences or if any of the messages resonated with you. And also, if you have any questions about self-development, healing, empowerment, inner child healing, feel free to comment down below. And thank you so much for listening this long. I appreciate it.